back when I started training dogs, I didn't really use the word punishment with my clients or, well, with anybody. Um, I would use the word correction. And I knew in my head that correction was sort of a euphemistic word for punishment, right? Like, but the word punishment had a very negative connotation to a lot of people and didn't want to use it. And even though in my head I was using it much more in the meaning of what people meant by punishment, the corrections were fairly harsh, fairly intense, and probably way more than I needed to do. I didn't know better at the time. I know better now, whatever. But I didn't like the word punishment because I felt like I was going to get a lot of pushback from people. So I'd say correction, and correction was a euphemism for punishment. And now I also avoid the word punishment, but for different reasons. So I've come to the conclusion that I think punishment is objectively a bad word. Now, I don't mean it's a swear word. Obviously, it's not offensive to say. And I don't mean that the concept of punishment is bad, because it's not. It's a part of what we're going to talk about in this video is uh, a better concept of punishment than what is in most people's heads. That's why I don't use it, though, is because the way we use it in behavior, the way we intend to use it in behavior, and the way people hear it is not the same thing. And that's not just true for people outside the behavior world, but we'll get to that more. Like within behavior, we say the word punishment, what it's supposed to mean. What punishment is supposed to mean in the behavior world is something that reduces the likelihood of something to happen again in the future, right? So if the dog gets in the trash and you effectively punish them, then they'll be less likely to get in the trash in the future. That's what we mean. That's all. That is all. There is no inherent idea that it has to be intense or unpleasant, really. It just has to be, the alternative has to be preferable, right? There's no sense of retribution. There's no sense of penalty. It's simply, when this happens, and therefore I don't want to do this again because I don't want to make that happen, right? Now, when we use punishment in our daily language, and we're talking to one another, or when we're talking about crime and punishment, right? We have a different meaning. When we talk about punishment in those sense, we're talking about repaying a debt. We're talking about a penalty, some sort of negative consequence, and it's got to be sort of equivalent to the crime. Like the punishment has to fit the crime. We hear this all the time, right? And we talk, have they paid their debt to society? So there's the idea that something is owed, that you've earned some sort of negative consequence, and now we're going to apply that to you, right? Like there is no question, there's nobody asking in terms of for example, the criminal justice system, whether or not a particular sentencing guideline actually reduces the likelihood that somebody's going to reoffend. They don't really care about that, because what they want to do is they want to make sure that everybody watching, the constituents, the people that vote for these people and vote for the people who create these laws, feel like justice has been served. So that's justice and not punishment in the sense of behavior. So when I say punishment to the average person, in their head, they're going to probably think, they're more likely to think of that, like what penalty has the dog earned? How do I make the dog pay for this, as opposed to how do I reduce the likelihood that this dog's going to do this thing in the future? And if that was the whole problem, you know what? I wouldn't even bother to make this video. I just say, you know what? It's better to use correction with your clients, because the word punishment makes them feel uncomfortable. And there's a whole thing about sometimes corrections are actually negative reinforcement, but we're going to avoid that for right now, because that's not what this topic is about, right? But even in the dog world, even in the behavior world, we use punishment in a way, more often than not, in a way that we don't mean. Like, for example, if you look at a positive only trainer or a force free trainer, or anyone who uses those sorts of monikers, they will say, I don't use punishment when I'm training my dog. Now, what they usually mean is they don't use positive punishment. And so the difference between positive and punishment is important here. I gotta get a little nerdy here for a minute, so give me a second. Positive punishment means you add something unpleasant, right? You add something the dog wants to avoid. So, you may use, that's a bad dog, you scold them, or maybe, you make a loud noise or throw something. You're adding something to the environment to make the dog want to avoid that consequence. Negative punishment is when you remove something. Like, so you're petting a dog, they jump up to you, go, I'm not going to pet you anymore. That's negative punishment, right? So it's a valid form of punishment, and it's very useful. But when positive trainers or force-free trainers, or however they want to call themselves, because there's a lot of terminology and I don't want to debate that, but when they say they don't use punishment, they don't mean, I don't believe, they don't mean that they don't use negative punishment. If a dog jumps up on them while they're petting, I'm sure they'll be able to take their hands away. As a matter of fact, one of the most common pieces of advice that I hear people pick up on the internet about jumping up is to turn their back on the dog. Don't pet them and turn their back on the dog. That is an attempt at negative punishment. It often doesn't work, but again, that's a whole other video that we can talk about that. But that's negative punishment. So when they say they don't use punishment, they mean they don't use positive punishment, right? Now, on the other side of the coin, the so-called balance trainers, the trainers who are more pro-punishment, if you will, who believe that punishment is valuable and important and something that we should be able to use. And there's a whole wide range of this, guys. Like there are people who will, give the dog a light leash check, and there's people who will, light the dog up with an e-collar, and they all, most of them call themselves balanced. So, like, I'm going to try and stay away from that sort of scale, right? A lot of balanced trainers, they will say that you cannot stop aggression without punishment. If you have a dog who's a bite risk, you must use punishment. Now, I can agree with that as long as we accept that negative punishment is a thing. Okay, well, time out. I was listening back to that after I recorded it, getting ready to prepare it to upload, and I went, whoa, hold on a minute. I didn't make that very clear. So I want to just interject some things in here real quick. Like when certain trainers say that you can't solve a problem without punishment, the logic goes like this. If punishment is something that reduces the likelihood of a behavior to be repeated in the future, then anything you do to reduce that likelihood is by definition punishment. And that's a neat little rhetorical trick, but it's actually not how it works, right? I don't want to get into all the details, but we can remove the likelihood that a dog will do something by giving them something else to do that is more effective. And that's an important part, because people go, oh, well, they still have the ability. Sure, like I can still use, if I can find one, I can still use a dial-up modem and sit there and listen to my computer make weird noises while I try and connect and spend an hour downloading a picture. But why am I going to do that when I have Wi-Fi and 5G and all of this other stuff where I can download that picture nearly instantly? Why would I bother with that less effective thing? I was never punished for using dial-up internet. I just found something better. So when you replace a behavior with a more effective behavior, one that works, that often does remove it. But what they will say to that is, but the opportunity to use Wi-Fi is still in your repertoire. You're still willing to do that in a pinch. And so even if you replace the dog's other behavior, for the most part, you still haven't removed it from their options, their list of options. Okay, fine. And so when I said I can accept that punishment is necessary for that, that's kind of what I meant. I didn't mean that you can't say, for example, make an aggressive dog safe. Now, again, I'm going to be real particular here because people will maybe nitpick on this. What do I mean by safe? There's no such thing as a safe dog. If they have a heartbeat and they have teeth, they're dangerous or potentially dangerous, right? Any dog can bite and will bite if pushed hard enough. But what I mean is there's a level of safety that we accept from our dogs, and there's a level that we do not accept from our dogs. And everybody makes that decision for themselves. But under the right circumstances, any dog pressed hard enough will bite. What we're saying when we say my dog is safe is, I don't think that's likely. I don't think those situations are likely to occur, and I think my dog is safe, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say this. I am not literally saying that you must use punishment, positive or negative. I think you need to use at least negative punishment to get reliable behaviors, period. I think that's just part of it. At least the negative punishment. But really what I'm not trying to say that to stop aggression, you must use punishment. You can remove it out of what they're likely to do pretty easily without punishment, but to make it to where they'll never use it, yeah, you'll probably need to add a little bit of punishment in. But I think we can go a lot further with negative punishment than a lot of people think. So just wanted to make that clear before the video moves on. All right, so, and now for the rest of the video that I shot yesterday, I will use negative punishment on that a lot. And I have solved aggression issues, and many of them, without using positive punishment. But they don't mean that. They mean they don't use, you have to use positive punishment. They don't mean punishment, they mean positive punishment. So even within the scope of behavior, when we say punishment, we tend to get caught up in that vernacular and that common usage, and we tend to flex out of that behavioral usage, and we have to go, do you mean positive or negative punishment? So I think it's a bad word. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't use it. I'm not saying that it's not valuable when two professionals are discussing, but we, even amongst professionals, we need to make it real clear that what we're talking about and what constitutes positive punishment and how intense are we doing it, because it varies in intensity, duration, and how it's appropriate and how it fits with the dog's understanding. Like, there's a lot of things, but the word punishment itself comes with so much baggage that I avoid it whenever possible. The word punishment has some bad connotations that it probably doesn't deserve. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.